metal, concrete, plastic. What's going to get built out of?
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendon Traxler.
So I was sitting in on a talk the other day over on X, and they were discussing, floating habitat, floating, houses, buildings, all the way up to large-scale islands and stuff along those lines, man-made. And they're talking about different building elements across the gamut, all the way from concretes and steel, all the way to one guy was proposing ice. He had a whole entire theory on how that would be perfected out and used. Let's talk about plastic as well. And while we're not in the floating houses, office buildings, whatever you want to call it, since that's not really our thing, but they're still dealing with the ocean. So that's why I watch that area a whole lot, because they're figuring out what holds up very well in the ocean, and that can then be, mirrored to underwater. And so I like the idea of plastic a lot from a lot of different aspects, but I feel like the PR nightmare of saying, hey, we're going to put a giant plastic structure underwater probably is not going to go off well. So I talked about it with the guys too. And unless you spun it some way of like, hey, we took plastic out of the water so we could put plastic back in, or some, I don't know, some really cliche or cheesy line, something like that. I don't see that that's a viable avenue. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we can make plastic work, and that'd be awesome. But one thing that struck me in this thing I was sitting in was they're trying to propose all these different types of ways of building structures on the water. And then I look at underwater. And to me, the key factor has to be that it has to be repeatable. It has to be repeatable fast, and it has to hold up. Because when I look at building underwater habitats, I'm not looking at one-offs. The whole idea of ASC is that we can build a business where we can build a lot of these, and we can build them quick, basically cookie cutter them out, so that we can get them in the water all around the world for whomever wants them, as we see a bunch of different possibilities here. And so I listened to talk about Secrete and stuff, which takes time to build, or all those other things. And I like it. It's one of those things where I think that down the road we can definitely start having these one-offs or these habitats that take longer to build, especially if you're building like a giant one. If you're building something massive like a dome or something along those lines, it's going to take some time to build. It's not going to be a one, cookie cutter type of thing. And so that's when we can really use R&D money and go in and start experimenting with different ways. But at first, let's stick with the tried true methods of steel and concrete. We know those work. They've been tested. They've been used for decades. We know how to interact with them, fix them, and what signs to look for in case there's issues. So, I don't know. Maybe, and one thing about ASC and the guys that hold around me is we try to be very forward-thinking, and we want to be pushing the engineering envelope to an extent so that these habitats are bleeding edge, they're cool, they're sexy, they're modern / futuristic. But they have to be safe, and they have to work. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe plastic is the way to go. Maybe there's some other element out there that we can build from. And maybe you know what that is. So if you were building an underwater habitat before, and I know we have spoke about this before. I mean, this is a topic that's going to come up over and over again. But what would you use to build your underwater habitat?